Late afternoon sunlight spilled across Fairview Park, turning the trees into towering streaks of gold. The park buzzed with activity, children dashed to and fro, their laughter ringing out near the swings, joggers moved effortlessly along winding trails, and couples spoke in hushed tones on weathered benches. Among them, Jamir, a 16-year-old high school junior, strolled along the gravel path, his backpack hanging from one shoulder. He wasn't there to enjoy the vibrant scene. For him, this was simply a shortcut to the store, a mundane errand to fetch groceries for his mom. As he reached the park's midway point, something unusual snagged his attention. On a bench near the playground sat a small tan leather purse, oddly out of place, as if abandoned. Jamir stopped in his tracks, debating silently. He could walk away, it wasn't his business. But his curiosity and a nagging sense of duty tugged at him. Glancing around, he saw no one searching or even seeming to notice the misplaced item. Against his better judgment, he approached the bench. The purse was scuffed at the corners but sturdy in his hands. He felt his heartbeat quicken as he unzipped the main compartment. Inside, he found a wallet, keys, and a folded receipt. A driver's license peeked from the wallet's folds. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and soft blonde hair gazed back at him. Her name, Linda Carson. The address printed beneath her name made him glance around again, as if she might suddenly appear. But the park remained indifferent, oblivious to his discovery. Sighing, Jamir slipped the purse into his backpack, resigning himself to a task he hadn't planned for. His steps home felt heavier, the weight of the purse somehow amplifying his unease. Seated at the small dining table in his kitchen, the purse lay between Jamir and his younger sister, Tasha, who leaned closer, her wide eyes brimming with curiosity. "Did you find that? Is it full of money?" she asked, barely able to contain her excitement. Jamir shook his head and pulled the wallet into view. "No. It belongs to someone. Linda Carson. Her ID's right here." Tasha wrinkled her nose. "So, what are you gonna do with it?" "Return it," Jamir replied, his voice firm. Yet, deep down, he felt a pang of uncertainty. Their mom, wiping her hands with a dish towel, glanced over. "You're doing the right thing, Jamir. But be careful. Not everyone's trusting of strangers showing up at their door." Her words hung in the air, unspoken meanings hovering just below the surface. Jamir nodded, understanding her caution but unable to shake the thought of Linda Carson frantically searching for her purse. The next morning, Jamir double-checked the address and hopped on his bike. The crisp autumn air nipped at his cheeks as he pedaled through quiet streets. His nerves surged with every turn of the wheels. What if she thought he had stolen it? What if she slammed the door in his face? Doubts swirled, but he pushed forward, committed to seeing it through. The house matched the address, a modest brick home with a porch swing swaying gently in the breeze. Jamir's chest tightened as he approached, purse in hand. Taking a deep breath, he rang the doorbell. Hurried footsteps echoed, and the door swung open to reveal Linda Carson herself. Her expression shifted rapidly, from suspicion to relief, and finally, gratitude. "Oh my goodness," she breathed, her voice trembling. "You have no idea how worried I've been." Jamir extended the purse toward her. "I found it at the park. I figured you'd want it back." Linda's hands shook slightly as she accepted the bag. She opened it, her eyes scanning the contents before locking onto his with tears brimming. "Everything's here. You didn't take anything." "No, ma'am," Jamir said softly. "I just wanted to make sure it got back to you." Linda stared at him, her face unreadable for a moment before breaking into a warm, genuine smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "Thank you so much." She stepped aside, motioning toward the house. "Please, let me at least get you something to drink. You've gone out of your way for this." Jamir hesitated, his gaze flicking to his bike. "I'm okay, really. I just wanted to make sure you got it back." But Linda was insistent. "I won't take no for an answer. Just a moment of your time." Reluctantly, Jamir stepped inside. The house felt cozy, carrying the scent of fresh coffee and lavender. Linda gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table, and he did, awkwardly resting his hands on his lap. Moments later, she returned with a glass of lemonade and a plate of cookies. "Here," she said, placing them before him. "It's the least I can do." As Jamir sipped, Linda sat across from him, her fingers brushing over the purse's surface as though it might vanish again. I was convinced it was gone forever, she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. My whole life is in here, my ID, my cards, even this. She pulled out a photo of a man, her hand lingering. That's my husband. He passed away a few years ago. I take his picture with me everywhere. Her voice wavered, and she pressed her lips together. Jamir shifted in his seat, uncomfortable but moved. I'm sorry about your husband, he said quietly. Linda smiled faintly, brushing away a tear. You've done more than you know. Reaching into the purse, she retrieved a crisp $20 bill. I want to give you something for your trouble. Jamir immediately shook his head, his hands shooting up. No, ma'am. I can't take that. I didn't do it for money. But you deserve it, she insisted. Jamir stood firm. My mom always says we should do the right thing, no matter what, Jamir murmured, feeling a little uncomfortable under Linda's gaze. I wanted to help. Linda studied him intently, her eyes softening as she took in his words. For a long moment, her expression shifted, something almost like admiration quietly forming on her face. Finally, she spoke, her voice gentle yet purposeful. Well, she began, tucking the bill back into her purse with a deliberate motion, maybe there's another way I can help you. Jamir blinked, his brows knitting in confusion. What do you mean? Linda didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. Her gaze turned thoughtful, as if she were piecing together something in her mind. Slowly, she tilted her head, studying him with quiet deliberation. Tell me, Jamir, she said, her voice soft but inquisitive, do you live around here? Yes, ma'am, Jamir replied, shifting a little uncomfortably, just a few blocks over. Linda nodded, her fingers still tracing an absent pattern on the table. And what about school? She asked, looking at him more closely now. What grade are you in? I'm a junior at Riverdale High, Jamir replied. It's okay, I guess. I've been thinking about college, but, well, it's not easy. Linda's brows lifted, surprise flickering across her features. College? That's wonderful, she exclaimed. What do you want to study? Jamir hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of his glass, thoughts swirling. Engineering, he said quietly. I like building things, figuring out how stuff works. But my mom's already working 2 jobs, and college is expensive. For a moment, the room fell into silence. Linda's expression softened, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. You remind me of my son, she said, her voice quiet. He was just like you. Your son? Jamir asked softly, his curiosity piqued. Linda nodded, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on the mantel across the room. Jamir followed her eyes and saw the image of a young man in a cap and gown. His face was framed with pride, his eyes filled with youthful promise. His name was Kyle, Linda explained, her voice trembling slightly. He passed away in a car accident 5 years ago. He was bright, just like you, always had big dreams. He wanted to be an architect. Jamir shifted in his seat, his discomfort growing as the weight of her words settled in. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Linda gave him a faint smile, though tears threatened to spill from her eyes. Thank you, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion. You know, when you lose someone like that, it changes how you see the world. I try to honor Kyle by helping people when I can. And you, Jamir, you've shown me that there's still so much good in this world. Jamir's cheeks flushed, embarrassed by the praise. I just did what anyone should do, he muttered, avoiding her gaze. No, Linda replied firmly, her voice gentle but resolute. Not everyone would have. It's rare to meet someone who chooses kindness when they don't have to. That's why I want to help you. Jamir blinked, his heart racing with a mix of hope and disbelief. You don't have to do that. I mean, you don't even know me. Linda smiled warmly, a knowing glint in her eyes. I know enough, she said softly. And besides, it's not about what I have to do. It's about what I want to do. For the first time, Jamir allowed himself to imagine a future where college wasn't just a distant hope, but something within reach. The next day, Linda wasted no time in setting her plan into motion. She spent the entire morning calling friends, former colleagues, and members of the local community. Linda had always been active in Dayton's civic programs, but now she had a personal mission to help Jamir get closer to his dreams. Her first call was to Mr. Reynolds, the director of a local nonprofit that provided scholarships to underprivileged youth. The moment Linda explained Jamir's story, Mr. Reynolds was intrigued. "A young man with that kind of integrity deserves a chance," he said. "Have him stop by our office next week, and we'll see what we can do." Next, Linda contacted her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a retired teacher who ran a tutoring program. "If he's aiming for engineering, he'll need strong math and science skills," Mrs. Henderson said. "I'd be happy to work with him." By the end of the day, Linda had lined up several opportunities for Jamir: scholarship applications, free tutoring, and even a summer internship with a local architect. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so inspired. Meanwhile, Jamir had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. He spent his weekend helping his mom clean the house and playing video games with Tasha, trying to keep his mind off Linda's promise. A part of him didn't want to get his hopes up. Then, on Monday evening, Linda called. Her voice was bright, full of excitement. "Jamir," she said, her words almost bubbling over, "can you stop by my house tomorrow? I've got some people I'd like you to meet." Curious and a little nervous, Jamir agreed. The next afternoon, he found himself sitting in Linda's living room, surrounded by strangers who all seemed eager to help him. "Jamir, this is Mr. Reynolds," Linda said, introducing the man sitting to her left. "He runs a scholarship program and wants to help you with your college applications." Mr. Reynolds extended his hand, smiling warmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Jamir. From what Linda's told me, you've got a bright future ahead of you. Let's make sure you have the tools to reach it." Jamir's mouth fell open slightly, his hand trembling as he shook Mr. Reynolds' hand. A mix of gratitude and disbelief washed over him. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Linda gestured to another woman, who beamed at Jamir. "And this is Mrs. Henderson," she said. "She's a retired teacher and an expert in math and science."